You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 66. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Archaeotech is a show where we break down technology and try to tell you the best way to use it, or not use it. On today's show, we'll discuss file formats. That's right, it's something we all need to talk about, but never do. Let's get to it. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. Paul, how's it going?
Pretty good. How have you been?
Pretty good. I got to open the show since this is the really the only show I can talk about this on. But as we're recording this, it's actually Halloween, October 31st. And any of you who either is an Apple fanboy or listens to this show at all probably knew that the iPhone 10 pre-orders were Friday, the Friday before this, whatever date that was, October 29th or 27th or something. Now, the way Apple does things, I'm just going to tell you this real fast. The way Apple does things is at 12:01 Pacific time on the day that they're supposed to go for pre-order, whatever it is, iPhone, watch, iPad, it doesn't matter, whatever they put in pre-order status, then you can order it. So what that means is everybody that wants to get one, which is usually a week away, so this Friday, November 3rd, is when all the iPhone 10s will ship, and it's the first time you'll be able to see one in a store, or actually buy one in a store. They might have some in there now. I don't even know. But people will be lining up at stores because there's a very limited number actually available on Friday for pre-order and in store. Most stores are only going to have about 10 or 15 of them, from what I've heard. At least right off the bat. Over the next few months, they'll start shipping millions of them from China. But anyway, so usually I'm up for the pre-order. I'll stay up till midnight on that Thursday night, and I'll have my window open, and I'll be ready for the pre-order. And last Thursday night, I'm at a conference. I didn't get into the room. I got into the room about 10:30, which is pretty good for Thursday night on this conference I go to. And I immediately turned on my iPad, and I had the AT&T store up on half my split screen and the Apple store up on the other half, and they were both had their splash screens up that said, we've taken the store down. We'll be back up shortly. And they do that. So there's no other buying. I feel bad for people who aren't going there to actually pre-order a phone, because if you want to do anything else, you can't. You have to wait until the next day.
Yeah, you're stuck.
You're stuck. So I got in about an hour and a half ahead of midnight, and by the time midnight came around, right at about 12:01, the AT&T store went live. That screen went away, it refreshed, and it said, your wait is 2 minutes. We've got your place in line, your wait is 2 minutes. And usually in this world of pre-orders, 2 minutes is a lifetime. I was thinking, okay, I already assigned myself to a late December delivery date. So, that's what's going to happen. I was like, all right, fine, whatever. And the 2 minutes went by. I was right about 2 minutes, and then it went to another screen where presumably I could do the pre-order. And right as I saw that screen flash up where it had the options, it kicked me out. And there was, I saw my username and password blanks, and I was like, oh, son of a bitch. And I was just calm. I was already resigned to the fact that I was never going to get this thing like in 2017 or maybe late December. So I signed back in and went right to the pre-order screen again, and then said, select all your options. Didn't give me any wait list or anything like that. I was like, okay, well, I'll see what happens here. I went through the whole thing. Took just like a minute. I got the 256 gig space gray iPhone 10, and then it said, okay, thanks, you're all set. No other words, no email confirmation, no nothing. I didn't get an email confirmation until late on Friday, late in the afternoon on Friday. And somehow, by some crazy, weird computer miracle, I got a November 3rd delivery date.
Oh, excellent.
So, I know. So the iPhone 10 will be here on Friday. And I'm mentioning that because I'll open it up. I don't like to do... A lot of people like to do unboxings these days. Mm-hmm. I don't like to do an unboxing. I like to do hey, let's check this thing out, because some people really get off on seeing it come out of the box, but Apple phones have come out of the box the same way every year for the last 6 years. Right. You open the lid, bam, there it is. Who cares about that? So I'm going to open it up, load it up with my software, get it all going, and then we're recording another episode of You Call This Archaeology live on Facebook at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. So if you're not following us on Facebook, go find us there. Just type in Archaeology Podcast Network and you'll find it. And if you like the page, you should get a notification next time we go live, but it'll be 4 p.m. If you miss it, then it's always there for replay. But I'm going to talk about my first impressions on the phone because I've talked about it here on the show. And I think it's going to be great, especially coming into winter for people that are still working over the winter. With Face ID, you'll be able to open it up without taking your gloves off. With voice recognition, you'll be able to open apps, probably type, and do a lot of things without ever taking your gloves off. And I think that's going to be kind of a game changer for cold weather archaeology at the very least. So,
is that what you're looking most forward to with this?
I think so, personally. Sometimes it's a real pain in the ass, even with Touch ID being way better than putting in a passcode. Sometimes, especially when you're cold, I mean, I'm walking to work, and as it's starting to get colder in Reno, Donner Pass, an hour from me, is supposed to get 1 to 2 feet of snow this Saturday. We could have snow down in the valley this Saturday. So it's starting to get real cold, and I intend to keep walking to work, especially since I sold one of our cars yesterday. And I'm really looking forward to being able to just pull it out and look at it and have it recognize me, and then just unlock the phone, and then I can use Siri to open apps, because you can say, I won't say the hey word, but you can say, Siri, launch blah blah blah, and it just did it. See, you bitch, activated my phone. I didn't even say hey. Damn it! I wonder how many other phones I just activated. Anyway, it says, you say launch this, and she'll launch an app. A lot of people don't know that because they just click on the app. But if you're using hands-free or something, you can say launch this, and it will launch the app. And if the app manufacturers or developers have put in some voice technology inside that works with Siri, because Apple started opening that up to app controls. So as they add more app controls, if it's an app that you have documents on, you can say start a new document. You can say, dictate. You can say dictation, or you can have it write and do things like that. There's a lot of functionality you can do without ever touching the phone.
That'll be
and I think it's just getting better and better.
Especially with the cold weather, that really applies to last week's topic, about how to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
About, having the rainouts and, hating to pull out my phone in the winter because my fingers will freeze right up. That would be useful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's get into today's topic. And Paul, why don't you go ahead and introduce it? Because you kind of brought this to my attention, and I think it's a fantastic topic to talk about. And, I mentioned it in the intro.
Yeah, this is a bit more of a nuts and bolts, I hope. File formats. I've dealt with various file formats my entire professional career, even before that. You'd have to deal with it in college, high school even. Converting between different file formats, submitting for publications, different formats for photographs, different formats for all the various kinds of data that we have, be it GIS or database, spreadsheets, on down the line. Data files and file formats is just something that's always been in the back of my mind, so much so that in my dissertation, I devoted part of my chapter on tech and the computer approaches I took to just discussing different file formats for different reasons. It underlies so much of what we do, and that it's not necessarily the sexiest of topics. It's not talking about some whiz-bang new hardware, but it's something that I think that every archaeologist has to have a really good grounding in dealing with in order to do their work effectively and in order to collaborate with their colleagues effectively. And this came to a head with me about a week and a half ago. I was at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World, ISA, which is part of NYU out here. They had a one-day conference called Digital Publishing in Mediterranean Archaeology. And it was a great conference. The different speakers talked about their various projects, how they're integrating old data. Some of these Mediterranean projects go for decades, and from dig director to dig director, sometimes from institution to institution. And so we have a variety of different recording techniques, a variety of different kinds of data collection and publications that have trickled out or come out in big blasts, over the years, and how these various archaeologists were trying to incorporate old data with their new data, how they were trying to present their new data and their recompiled old data to the public in various formats. And it was really interesting, but what struck me was that a lot of them were trying to reinvent the wheel always. And I asked a question that kind of went over like a lead balloon. I asked, or it wasn't so much a question, I guess. Maybe that's why it went over so badly. But I raised my hand in the discussion and I said, a lot of you guys it's great that you're thinking about these things and you're wondering about how to, what the best kind of a text document format is for longevity, or how they should, what format they should preserve their photographs in. And I said, well, we're trying to figure this out here in academic archaeology. Each project is their own little island. And yes, it's great that we've come together for this day to share our ideas. But in CRM, a lot of this has been hashed out already. And a lot of it's been hashed out, not necessarily by eggheads trying to figure out what the best way is, but there's some bureaucrat that said, I want it in X, Y, or Z format. And then you all have to conform to that. And it takes away a lot of the angst, actually, I think. So anyhow, I just wanted to have a bit of a wide ranging discussion today about the different kinds of files that we're dealing with and the different kinds of formats and how one goes about converting between them, what some of the strengths and pitfalls of various ones are, and maybe some of the tools that we use for wrangling all these different files. So where to start? Do we want to start with photographs or do we want to start with text files? Because those seem to be the two biggest classes.
Let's start with photographs, I think, because as you were saying that, it just made me think of a really big issue that we have here in Nevada. It was the BLM issues guidelines and the guidelines that they issue for, archaeological work within BLM land, which is like 90% of the state. So everybody follows these guidelines, and even agencies that, even some landowners that aren't on BLM land, they still follow the BLM guidelines because there's no other guideline. So they issued the new guidelines in 2012, I want to say, and that was the last time they sent them out. And I don't exactly remember what the photo requirements were before that because I'm so used to the new ones. But the new photo requirements were they had to be 12 megapixel or 10 megapixel minimum and TIFF format. Okay. Now, most companies that weren't running like a digital SLR, which was most companies, most of them just had like a $200 point and shoot that they'd buy at a Walmart, and that was their camera that they'd use for site photography on survey. Now, if you get into a lab situation or you get into, you're recording structures and things like that, there's different requirements. But your basic site overviews on a survey, an initial survey, and your basic in-field artifact and feature photos, all being taken on a relatively crappy point and shoot camera, and they'd last about a season when the lens would slowly come out mechanically.
Shots and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah. And when the lens would come out and you hear like the from the sand in it, you know it's done. Yeah. But anyway, so what most people are doing, these cameras didn't, at least then, some of them might now, but they didn't have the ability to shoot anything but JPEG. So what people were doing was they were taking a JPEG and they were converting up to TIFF. And anybody, this is a good conversation to have to start off file formats because there's a reason that file format exists, right? We record, we often have raw files for our podcast in WAV format because WAVs are a lossless, uncompressed file, which means there's no information lost. And when we give you the file, the one you're listening to now, it's a high quality MP3, but if you were to really dig into that file, it's actually missing audio segments. They're just so close together that your brain processes right over them and you don't hear them. You need like actually fairly sophisticated equipment to realize that you're actually listening to a compressed file. Well, a JPEG is also a compressed file.
It's the same thing.
Exactly. A JPEG is a compressed file, and there's information. I don't exactly know what the algorithms are, but they basically take pixels away every once in a while. As long as it's similar to one next to it, they'll take it out. And then when it's rendered, the photo's rendered correctly. Right. But in reality, if you try to zoom in, the resolution's just simply not there in the JPEG. So that's why they wanted TIFF files.
You do that with files on the internet where somebody's taken a JPEG and recompressed it too many times or too strong. And suddenly everything looks kind of like a mosaic. It's got this funny square grid overlay to it, kind of. It gets really noisy.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's the thing you have to know about TIFF files. They're not raw files, so they're not completely uncompressed. But they are a higher quality file. This is why a JPEG could be 200 kilobytes, but a TIFF file is 3 gigabytes or something, not gigabytes, megabytes, something like that. It's I'm not even getting the numbers right probably, but you know what I mean. That's a very big difference in file size with a TIFF file.
Orders even.
Exactly. So what people hopefully now are doing, and this is one reason if you're trying to go digital to get like an iPad Pro or the latest iPhones or the latest Google devices, is because a lot of these are starting to shoot in TIFF. They have the ability to shoot in TIFF. They'll still default to JPEG to save you space, but you have the ability to turn TIFF on. I know with the iPhone 7 Plus, we first got that ability in the iPhone 7 Plus. So anyway, just when we're talking about file formats, the format actually means something. It's not just a string of letters at the end. It's an indication of what's inside that file. And you have to know what you're dealing with to know how to change that, because people are always concerned about converting file formats to open in something else, which is part of this discussion because it's archivability. In 20 years, are we going to be able to open JPEGs? Are we going to be able to open TIFFs? If we have TIFF files sitting in BLM disks like they asked for, are we going to try to convert those to something else? If we were sitting there having JPEGs and the ability to read JPEGs went away for some reason, and we had to convert them to TIFF, you have to know that what that's actually doing. It's not going to be a smooth conversion because you're trying to add data where data doesn't exist. So that's my rant on photographs. I've given that one before.
So do you like TIFFs or not? Anytime I see anything that mandates TIFFs, my skin crawls. I learned to hate them 25 years ago.
The only thing I don't like about them, honestly, the only thing I don't like about them is not a lot of things open them. So, you can't just open the TIFF file and look at it sometimes unless you've got the right programs. And
yeah, that seems to be something that's fewer and fewer programs deal with them.
Right. So anyway, that's my rant on photographs. So do you have anything else on photos? That's really my biggest one right there is understanding conversions.
Well, you mentioned raw data, and TIFFs are one kind of raw data in that every pixel has a certain value, and there's no attempt to interpolate, no attempt to try to fool your eye into seeing something that's not there, like JPEGs do. There are ways of compressing TIFFs that are lossless, but they don't get anywhere near the strength of compression that JPEGs can. But when you're dealing with cameras, especially when you're dealing with DSLRs, there's another whole file format that's called RAW, and that is basically the sensor data itself. And then on top of that, afterwards, you can't just look at it directly. You need to run through special software, something like Adobe Lightroom. And the advantage to raw data is that it's really malleable. You can make all sorts of corrections that you couldn't to other data file formats. So you can adjust your exposure, for example. If you bungled your exposure, you have a much wider latitude to adjust it in the raw file than you do in even a TIFF file. The disadvantage, and this gets to the point about archivability, the disadvantage is that basically each sensor has its own raw file format. So, yes, there are families of them. Nikons are going to be one way, your Canons are going to be another way generally. But there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to open that raw file format. Whereas with JPEGs and TIFFs too, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to open them 20 years from now. The raw, right. Anybody's guess. But for the short term, if you want really high quality publication quality, publicity quality images, raw might be your best choice. But it's certainly for archivability and for transferring to other people. Forget about it. It's not very good.
Yeah, I almost feel like if they require TIFF files at the Nevada BLM, they may as well just require raw files. I mean, let's just go, full tilt on this thing. Then can you make anything out of a raw file ultimately, once you open it up?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, you can. You have to. For a raw file. If you try to look at a raw file totally unprocessed, it just kind of looks like a grayish mass. I mean, you can see the details, but it's all the tonality of it is wrong. It just looks like you're looking through a slight gray haze. So they have to be converted to other formats. I don't know that archaeologists generally do use RAW. I know a lot of photographers do, and they use it because of that ability to then post-process it. So they use a whole tool set that mimics what they used to do in the darkroom, just now on the computer. Very useful, again, for publications and for publicity, but I don't know that it's very good for science and probably not for archivability. Resolution you'd mentioned too. So that's the other half of it, not just the file format, but the resolution. And there are a lot of factors that go into that. So you're basically be mandated 10 megapixels at a minimum for the files that you store. That used to be a fairly large photo file, but by today's standards, it isn't. Have you found like any practical limits one way or the other? Too large, too small?
Not really, because generally out here, you need an image that you can put in the report, which is just a printed image as long as it shows up well. But the archived stuff that you turn in, we always turn it in on writable DVDs usually. And unless the project is truly massive and you've got tens of thousands of photographs, I've never run into a problem where you're going to run out of space on that DVD. I mean, some projects will have multiple DVDs, don't get me wrong, but that's where they're being stored. And there's other things we could talk about with how those aren't exactly archival out to, an incredibly long period of time. They have their own issues. But as far as size goes, I don't even worry about size really that much anymore. Memory is cheap and storage is cheap. So it's not a concern for me. And it shouldn't be a concern for any company.
When I did the bulk of my dissertation fieldwork, which was in between 99 and 2004, the resolution and the storage of files was definitely an issue. So, it was a balance. Do I shoot all my photos at the highest resolution that my camera can do, or do I do it at the next step smaller so I can store them? Because if you ran out of storage and you're in the middle of the desert, and that could grind the entire project to a halt.
Yeah.
Until you can get someplace to get a new hard drive.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's take a break real quick. We'll come back and talk about some conversions, and then we'll get into some other file types. And don't forget, we do have an App of the Day segment today. In the meantime, go check out arcpodnet.com/members if you're looking to support the APN in some way. We're trying to keep this network ad-free for the most part. And the way to do that is to be listener supported. We only need like 0.01% of you, of our nearly 90,000 monthly listeners, to actually subscribe at one of the three levels to fund this entire thing. It doesn't take that much money. So consider it, arcpodnet.com/members, and we'll be back in a second.
This network is supported by our listeners. You can become a supporting member by going to arcpodnet.com/members and signing up. As a supporting member, you have access to high-quality downloads of each show and a discount at our future online store, and access to show hosts on a members-only Slack team. For professional members, we'll have training shows and other special content offered throughout the year. Once again, go to arcpodnet.com/members to support the network and get some great extras and swag in the process. That's arcpodnet.com/members.
Okay, we're back, and we're talking about file formats on this episode 66 of the Archaeotech podcast. And we ended the last segment talking about photos and different things like that. Paul, what do you got to say about photo conversion? Because we were kind of getting into that a little bit. Yeah,
so the big tool for photo conversion, of course, is Photoshop, and everybody's been using that for as long as Photoshop's been around. That's pushing 3 decades now.
Something like that.
Something like that. And so it has the entire suite of photo adjustments and tweaking things, adjusting to however you need to. It's, an invaluable step in just about everybody's toolbox if they're trying to go to publication. But it's also a useful tool because it's so strong and so ubiquitous for converting between one file format and another. So if you have that TIFF file that you've recorded that you're going to submit for your site report, but you also want to send reduced JPEG, to a collaborator or even to a publication, or use it for a presentation, whatever. It's got an excellent set of tools that allow you to very finely tweak those. If you're putting something up on a website, you can use its tools for converting something to a JPEG or a PNG, and it's really second to none for all those. So, I'm not going to rehash Photoshop in any depth because I think everybody knows about it. But I did also want to mention that if you're somebody like me and you like working on the command line, another tool that's really good at converting between different file formats is something called Image Magic. And I'll make sure we get the link to its website in the show notes. Mm-hmm. It's tricky to use in that it's command line, so you don't have a GUI. You're throwing images at it and you're not seeing the images generally. It does have a viewer tool, but I don't know anybody that's ever actually used it. The advantage of it is it's an open source project. It's been around forever, probably just about as long as Photoshop has. And if you have a particular tool set that, you're running photographs through in order to output them to different places, like maybe some of it's going for publication, some of it's going for a website, some of it's going for inclusion in your database. I don't know. You can think of different kinds of outputs. You can automate that very easily through the command line with Image Magic. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to mention that. And then also kind of as a side note to this, this was brought up this summer when you had Acacia Berry on and you were talking about submitting photographs. And she said that they had tools that they were doing, amongst other things, was removing some of the metadata, because obviously metadata can be very dangerous if it's revealing locations of sites.
Right. Yeah.
people don't always realize that they have GPS, especially if they're taking the photos with their phones. They don't always realize that they've got that location data there. And it can be extremely useful. It can be very useful for you as the archaeologist, but it's not always something that you want to publish, to the wider world, because especially with the fear of looting, you can be revealing information about the kinds and locations and value of certain sites that you don't want just out in the general public.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've got a colleague that he likes to tell a story about he was going to a company to give a presentation about I think photogrammetry and some other things, just photography in general. I don't know what the exact topic was, but he was going to discuss file formats and photo file formats specifically. And as an exercise, he thought he was trying to find some images for the presentation he was making from their company website to kind of customize it a little bit. And since he's a photo geek, he went to their website, and this is a pretty big company, right? So he went to their website. They had all the PR images of people working and doing things up on their website that everybody puts up. Well, you can always just right click on an image and hit save as, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's on somebody else's website. And it's not like save as this screenshot. It's the actual photo that's being linked to more often than not. So he did right click save as. And then since he's a photo geek, he wanted to see what the qualities of those photos were. And he opened it up in, I think, Lightroom is what he used. And the GPS information was there, the type of camera that was used. So the person's phone that took the picture that was on there. All this information was tagged in the metadata for these photos that are on the company's homepage. And everything was just right there for the world to see if you know how to find it. And more people know how to find it. So it's a good discussion to have about conversions, because not only do you find things that use things when you're converting files, convert them to a format that's appropriate for the medium you're putting them on. If it's going on the internet, then it doesn't need to be a 12 megapixel photo. It won't load anyway. It can be a smaller photo. It can be a JPEG, but JPEGs still hold location metadata. Yep. So you want to be able to, you need something that you can open the file in to see if that metadata is still there and to strip that metadata from it. Because if you can't just know the metadata is there by looking at the file, like in your browser, in your Finder or whatever you use, your file explorer. A lot of times you're just not going to see that because those kinds of information aren't turned on. You need a special program to show you what's embedded in this file.
Right. And those special programs, you can use something big and heavy like Lightroom if you have it. But in general, what you want to look for, if you want to look for a free or low cost tool just to analyze or remove the metadata, you want to look for the term EXIF, EXIF. And that's the extended image metadata that gets attached to any kind of photograph that gets attached to your JPEGs from your phone. So EXIF is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and if you happen to have a Mac, which is I think rare in archaeology, but if you happen to have one, just open the file in preview and or just hit get info on the file. You can right click and hit get info, and it will show you the EXIF data and the location data if the file has any attached. You don't even need a special program. It's built right into the Apple computer. So I don't know if that's the same, if there's a equivalent in that for Windows. I'm sure there's got to be something, but this is built into the OS for Apple. So
again, really useful in most situations, but sometimes it just tells too much to too many.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's move on from photos and go to the next most popular thing people use, which is basically document files. So kick us off on document files. Document files.
I mean, when I first got into archaeology, it was kind of a free-for-all between Word and WordPerfect and RTF files and Nisus Writer files and Lord knows what, MacWrite and everything. Yeah. And all that, over the last 25, 30 years, it's all shaken down. And so pretty much Word is the king of the hill. Most publishers are expecting Word documents, and most people have Word somewhere in their tool chain. That doesn't mean that you still don't have to convert in and out of Word formats. I'm not a fan of Word. There's still some serious problems with the format. Conversion can actually be tricky because Microsoft doesn't publish their the specs for the Word documents. So they're basically anybody that wants to open up a Word document in a different word processor, the conversion has been black boxed, So there are details of the conversion, things that get lost in translation. So because of that, there is a whole nother trend to using open formats. So, probably the best known in scientific circles is LaTeX. All the input documents for a LaTeX file are text, originally all ASCII text. Now there are various extensions, so you can throw UTF text at it as well. There are things like Markdown, which is a programming language, kind of, but it's supposed to be very human readable. And then you can process it out to different things. Markdown is made specifically for HTML as an output, but there's a tool that I think everybody ought to have somewhere in their tool chain, which is called Pandoc. And that will take one file format and spit out a different file format amongst different text files. So you can throw a Word document at it and get a PDF or an HTML document out of it. Natively, it handles Markdown, which is a really useful file format. It's plain text files. You can handle UTF. You put a very minimal amount of formatting into it. This is a header, emphasize this, and it spits out then at the other end, once you've run it through Markdown, through Pandoc, whatever format is necessary for the certain venue. So again, spit it out as HTML, spit it out as PDF, spit it back through LaTeX, reprocess it. When you're submitting reports, are you doing it as actual Word files? Are you submitting PDFs? Is there some other format that's normally requested?
I'm glad you brought that up because at least with the BLM, they usually require again, on a DVD or CD or whatever you have, something writable, you'll have your final report on there. Now, I always put the final report on in PDF unless otherwise requested. Sometimes you'll get a request that they want it in a doc format for various reasons. I'm reluctant to do that for obvious reasons. The document can be altered, whereas a PDF, while not perfect, is more difficult to alter. There are ways to alter PDFs. If you have Acrobat Pro, you can actually alter anybody's PDF unless they've added another layer of security to it. So yeah, it's in general PDF is the preferred use. And again, some of the primary reasons for that, which I appreciate, are somebody can be running Word 95, and then as long as they export that as a PDF, then anyone can read it that can read a PDF, which there's hardly anybody that can't read a PDF these days. And I can send that to you, and you can still read that document. But if I send you a doc file from Word 95, and you're running, Windows 10 and the Office 365 latest version, it might not be backward. It might be too far back to actually be readable by future versions of Microsoft Office.
I have that happen at school here all the time. Teachers have, 2 decades worth of notes that they've taken, lesson plans and the like, and some of those older ones they wrote in Word 4, for example. And on the Mac back then, there was a forked file system, so it didn't put a file extension on by default. So they have these files that don't have an extension on it. They know they wrote them in Word 20 years ago. We try to open them. The operating system now has no idea what program to open them in. We add the .doc extension. Word launches and says, that's too old of a version. I can't open that. So we then have to run it through something like Pandoc or open it with a different program in order to convert it to be readable by the newer version of Word. So it can be a real struggle.
Right. Well, and the other problem you run into opening older versions, even if you do get something that can convert it to something that is openable and readable, is they're constantly changing the code on how these things work. So the code that says this A looks like this A and this line on the table goes right here might be completely different code or gone entirely. So you're going to get a random unreadable string of characters where that thing was supposed to be, especially if you're dealing with graphics or anything like that. Those always get hosed up on an older conversion. Text is text sometimes, unless it's some wacky font that you're using. But if you're typing in Arial or Times New Roman, that's probably readable, 20 years back. But anything else is going to be difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, and if you're going between platforms, it gets even worse.
Oh, yeah, and that's the other thing, too. Apple, at least, they're not arrogant enough. I mean, they're pretty arrogant in a lot of cases, but they're not arrogant enough to think that...
Yeah.
They do. But But I do appreciate that Apple can open nearly any document format, like Pages. Apple's Pages is their equivalent to Word. Now, Pages doesn't have as much functionality as Word. There's a lot more things you can do with Word, but I like Pages for its, if you're just doing something, let's say, relatively simple to slightly difficult, Pages is great because everything flows nicely. It moves around nicely. Word can just be a huge pain in the ass sometimes if you're just typing up a simple document. But that being said, you can export Apple's Pages documents as Word documents.
Mm-hmm.
You can export them as Word documents to be opened up on a Word machine. But Word, of course, is not Apple compatible, which means you can't open a Pages document with Word, and you can't save a Pages document with Word. So Microsoft's like, nope, we pretty much have the market on this one. We're good. Apple realized they don't want it, so they make it convertible.
Right.
So
now you have the danger then, though, if you are using Pages, which is pretty nice to use for creating, is what happens 20 years from now? Again, that 20 years from now question, is that Pages document still going to be open? Is there something that you can still use to read it? Word document, most likely yes, but with some asterisks, like what I just said about those old Word documents that our teachers created. I'm glad that you said that you liked submitting in PDF. I'm a big proponent of PDFs for output at the end. I don't much care what somebody's creating in. I personally like things like LaTeX and Markdown because they're very agnostic. But PDFs, I saw that early on when I was writing my dissertation, and I included part of that in that same chapter on computers and tech that I was using, because in 2007, 2008, Adobe, which had always published the specs for PDF, went ahead and made an ISO spec. I worked with ISO to make an open spec for PDFs. So version 1.7 of the PDF is an international specification, which is very handy, which means that other people can read the spec and then create interpreters for them. So it's not bound to one company in the same way that Pages or Word are. And PDFs came up actually at that conference quite a bit because it was publishing, right? So the different authors, the different archaeologists that were presenting wanted to preserve the formatting, the look and the feel of what they wanted to preserve. They wanted the structure there, but they wanted to do it in a way that they could, they could send to a printer and the printer could print out and you'd get the paper copy, or it could be posted online in a way that was fairly usable. So it opened up a few different avenues for how people like to read it. And then there were other advantages like the ability to embed video or 3D models directly into the document. That obviously doesn't work once you've printed it to paper, but it's a way of enriching the output if you're presenting something across on electronic media. So I think that, for end result, PDF is good. The questions are the what's going into it to start with.
Yeah, I always try to save to make sure that there's editable versions of whatever I'm doing on my drives, even after the project is over, and then a PDF of that thing as well, because who knows when that's going to be opened again or by who, and are they going to be able to see it? Are they going to do anything with it? And if there's a PDF there, chances are they can open it, because I tend to work in Pages when I'm just doing initial stuff on a document. If I'm the only one writing a report, or I'm the only one writing a proposal or something like that, all my templates are in Pages because I like the program better for those sorts of things. But then again, all my site records are in Word because Word has the functionality to get the data out of tap forms, which I use in the mail merge thing, which Pages doesn't have. And then I just do all my site forms in Word because of that. So yeah, use what's best for whatever you're doing, but make sure other people can read it too when you're done. That's basically the long and the short of that. Yeah. In the last few minutes here, let's talk about data files real quick, because that's the third component to this whole thing that most people use.
Yeah. So the most basic data files that people are dealing with are probably spreadsheets. So Excel spreadsheets, OpenDoc spreadsheets, CSV files. Data in a database can usually be exported as a SQL file. There may be XML or JSON files. With your data, I mean, you're saying you're connecting your Word files to your tab forms. What format are those coming across as? Do you know?
Yes. So when I export from Tapforms, it actually comes out as a CSV file.
Excellent.
And then I have to tell Word mail merge, because it has the ability to read different formats. I have to tell it it's a CSV file, which we'll get into why that is here in a second. But I have to tell it it's a CSV file. Then it knows how to parse the data and apply it to my document.
Yeah, so I use, as part of my work, I use spreadsheet files constantly. Usually it's an intermediary step between something coming out of a database and going into some other database or going into some other report. CSV files all the time. The advantage of Excel and OpenDoc files being real spreadsheet files is that you can embed things into them. You can preserve formatting, and you can also embed your formulas, which is often extremely important. And you lose that with CSV, which is basically cell after cell in a grid form. But then again, CSV is a wonderful lowest common denominator. If you have data that aren't really reprocessed, but it's just record after record and it can fit into a tabular format, CSV is, I think, again, the way to go, in the same way that I think LaTeX and Markdown are extremely strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, and CSV, it's human readable too. If you were to just open the file with anything, open it in a text document, because CSV stands for comma separated values. And it's literally, you've got a string of values. Let's say that's your first row, and it's value 1, comma, value 2, comma, value 3, comma. And then when you hit the page return, that means next row. So commas, returns, and that's it. That structures your entire document, and you can make a table out of that. That's why I love CSV files. They're just so, you can't do anything complex with them, but for just storing data in a low size file format, nothing could beat that.
Right.
So
you can compress them down too, because they're text, and text compresses great. So if you're really worried about the storage, but then also CSV files, just about everything has tools for opening them. So, if you're programming something in Python, if you're using Excel, if you're writing something for the web, whatever, you can just crack it open and pull out the pieces that you need out of that CSV quite easily. Human readability, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's been one of the things that one of the trumps I've been banging on forever. Back at Masca, when we were programming sitemap, there was a previous version of the program that was developed at Masca, and we were updating it. And one of the things we had to do is we decided we wanted to update the file format to allow for different kinds of objects, but also to make it human readable, because the initial version, even though it was a CSV, there were codes for things. A 1 meant one thing, and a 2 meant something else, and a 3 meant something else, and a -1 meant something else yet. And none of those meant anything semantically to anybody. You had to know what those were. So we decided to replace them with actual words, point, line, that sort of thing. So under the idea that if we took a CSV file from our sitemap data 20, 30 years from now and handed it to somebody, they could probably reverse engineer what we did pretty easily. If we handed them one of the predecessor files, they would look at it and it just looked like a string of numbers, and it would be not necessarily meaningful in any way. So human readability becomes very important for I think, for raw data, for interchange, and also for archivability. I did mention briefly XML and JSON. XML can be kind of heavy in its structure, but it's also human readable, semantically organized. And JSON is basically a simplification of that. So each object in XML, instead of being encased in various tags, gets laid out sequentially, so you can kind of read it up and down, left to right. Not like a CSV file. It's more like a string of different things nested differently. But those are both data file formats that are worth looking into if you want to preserve, take your data out of your database and preserve it as a text file for posterity. Print it out even if you have to.
Right. All right. Well, we'll close this segment, and I'll just make one more comment about CSV files and a caution about them as well. CSV files, because of their ease of creation and their ability to be opened by just about anything, they're also really easy files to transfer in the field. Tapforms, again, for example, you can save out your data for the day or for the hour or for the site you just recorded or whatever the metric is, whatever your unit of measurement is. You can save that out and then airdrop that without any cell service, without anything. You just need Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on through another iOS device, phone, tablet, whatever, even a computer. You can airdrop that to another device real quickly, like a lot of data. in milliseconds. It just goes to the other device, and now you've got a backup in the field without any service, without any external network creating devices or anything, which is really great. The caution to that is if you're standing in like, you know, a store parking lot or something like that. I see this I use AirDrop literally all the time, and when I'm here at the Reno Collective where we record, if I go to AirDrop something for myself from one tablet or to my computer or something like that, the other 25 iPhones in the building show up as an option to AirDrop to. And if I just select one of those iPhones or one of those computers or something like that, all they have to do is hit accept on the other side and boom, transaction completed. And now they've got my data. So if you're doing this not in the field, be careful, because you don't want to accidentally hit somebody else's device because it's totally unencrypted. And if you just sent them archaeological data, you not only just broke the law, but you sent somebody archaeological data. So just be careful with that. That's all I would say.
Yeah. I can't add to that.
Okay. Well, that's all we have. Yeah, that's all we have time for. As I mentioned at the end of the last segment, .com/members in the ArcPodNet site will get you our membership site. But another way to support the network is arcpodnet.com/shop. And on that page, we have T-shirts. We've got more T-shirts coming, actually. I just need to get them up there. But we've got T-shirts, we've got coffee mugs, we've got all the stickers for all the shows. They're really cool. They're amazing, like vinyl stickers. I love them. They last forever, and they're good for weather and stuff like that.
I just picked up one of the T-shirts last week. I love it. Looks beautiful.
Nice, outstanding. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's perfect. So go get yourself some swag, and if you want to be a pro level member, as we mentioned at the last one, then you'll get all that stuff as part of your membership. After your first month, we'll send you a mug, a T-shirt, and all the stickers, and that's part of your membership. So, okay. Well, we're gonna take a break right now, and we'll come back for the App of the Day segment. Hey, podcast listeners. Do you find yourself wondering what the latest tablet or smartphone could do for your business? Wonder what GPS to pair with your device? Just trying to figure out how to go digital in the field without breaking the bank and or making a bad investment? Or did you find a technology company to work with but just aren't sure the questions you need to ask during the initial conversation? Well, you're not alone. There are literally thousands of tech combinations out there, and it can be really tough finding the right one for your business and your workflow. My name is Chris Webster, and I've been working in CRM since 2005, and I've been a tech enthusiast my entire life. I spend my time trying to figure out how to make archaeology more efficient both technologically and financially. No one is going to give you a big pile of money to do whatever you want with, so you have to make the most of what you have. The right gear can mean the difference between zero margins on that next project and an employee benefits package. That's where DigTech Concierge comes in. Let us be your technology guru. Whether you have just a few questions or want us on retainer 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, we're here to help. With years of experience, tens of thousands of acres of survey done completely digitally, and many, many people trained, DigTech is your tech BFF, just waiting to guide you through this process now and through the inevitable changes to come. Should you hold on to those tablets or upgrade? What about the new operating system? Will it crash your apps, or can you go ahead and do it? We know the answers and can guide you to a profitable year. Go to www.digtech-llc.com/tech-concierge to book a consultation or book us for the year. The yearly retainer includes unlimited calls and support and company training on software and gear. That's digtech-llc.com/tech-concierge. And concierge is CONCIERGE. To get going and go digital today. Call us before you make any decisions. We've been there before. Okay, we are back, and this is the App of the Day segment for episode 66. And we got a couple of apps right now that are really about quality of life, I think. A little less about using them in the field, and like I said, more about quality of life, although they can both help you out in different ways. So the first one I've got is, it's an ad I kept seeing come across my Facebook and things like that, because they had a real heavy ad push, I guess, marketing push, and it worked apparently, because I went and checked it out. But it's called Stash, and the full title is Stash Invest, and the links for these, of course, as always, will be in the show notes. But so basically what this is and from what I can tell, I think it might only work on iOS, because they, on their website, because I already have it, they weren't telling me what they were compatible with. But basically you can go on here, and I think this is great for field technicians and people that, quite frankly, don't make a lot of money, because you need to invest money. You should be planning for something. You might not make $1 million with this app, but you can at least invest a little bit. But the way they invest is the way that is what I like about it. There's nothing complicated to set up. You run through a bunch of stuff because it's investing. There's a lot of legal stuff that they have to do. They have to ask you a lot of your information. Anytime you own stock in something, you have to give up your social security number and all that stuff. So if you're reluctant to do that, then fast forward a few minutes, because you have to do that to use this application. You also have to link a bank account because they use your money. So, but the thing I like about this, once you get over those and you start to invest, you don't invest in individual stocks. That's where I think people get hung up. You invest in groups of stocks, basically, and you invest based on different things. Let me look here. If I go over to the Invest Tech category, there's things across the top that say I believe, I want, I like. So there's those three things, and then under those categories, there's different things. Like under I believe, the top one is called Clean and Green. It says make your money even greener, invest in the power of clean energy sources like solar and wind. So they've got a group of things here that are of that sort of category. And if I click on this, I can say I want to invest $5 a week or $5 a month even in this, and they will just pull $5 out of your bank account on a predetermined day and add it to your portfolio. And then however the stock is doing, it will go up and down, and you'll see it moving. There's combat carbon, they call it, for people that are combating carbon footprints. Data defenders, here's one, protect the world with cybersecurity. So any company that has to do with that. And you can dig into these farther if you want, or you can just stick with the major topic headlines. Here's the I want. So this is one where if you don't care about what you're investing in, the top one, which they say is recommended, is called the moderate mix. So it's a moderate investment. There's some risk, but it's not like heavy risk. It's like you're going to make, which usually means they're average performers. They're not going to go way high. They're not going to go way low, but they're going to be steady and predictable. And then there's the aggressive mix. It says these are just stocks that are making wildly fluctuating changes, which, you might have to keep an eye on that. Sell. And then there's, there's all kinds of different categories here. I went to the I like one as well, and I invested in American innovators, of course. Invest in tech companies that are changing the world, like Apple, Google, and Facebook is what it says. So now I actually own a little bit of stock in Apple now. I think it's like 0.0000001% of a share. I'm not really sure, but and they just got a ton of different things here. And I just love the way that it lays everything out here. It's not like you got to go find, like I said, little stocks and things in day trade. This is for longer term investments. This is for just, hey, I'm going to drop a few bucks a week into this thing, into these categories that I like, and I'm going to trust this company to pick the companies that go into those categories. And again, you can always, they can't just invest without telling you. I get frequent emails, and I've only been doing this for a couple of weeks. I get frequent emails that are telling me about my portfolio. Hey, these stocks are in it. This is what's going on. They have to divulge that information. So if all of a sudden one of these things I selected is investing in Walmart, sell. So, because I'm not going to invest in Walmart. But yeah, I think it's great. And it's like I said, it can be low risk. It can be high risk. But it's a way to not only put a little bit of money away, but if you select some of the moderate ones, you can put some money away and let your money work for you. You might only make $100 over the course of the year in interest, but it's probably better than you're going to get out of your savings account. So, and of course, as with anything, you get more the more you put in. So, and they've got little sliders and metrics that says, hey, if you put in $2,000 this year into moderate stocks at this historical growth rate, you'll have this much money after 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, stuff like that.
They have to divulge then what their performance is. Do you have any sense yet?
Yes. Yeah. So all these groups, you can click on, like, let me go back to my portfolio. So I can look at, let's say, American Innovators. If I click on this, it shows me a graph of the performance of American Innovators, which is done pretty well. I mean, it's pretty steady up. And it shows you exactly what it's
right there in the app.
Right, everything is right here in the app. You don't have to go anywhere. Let's see, American Innovators, as of, it says year-to-date change. So this year, it's gone up 34%. Since inception, it's since January 2004, God, it's gone up like 300%. So, yeah, and it just shows you that. And then you can see how the stock market works too. I can see 2008 here, even if they didn't have a calendar on here. I can see where 2008 is. But there's also little fluctuations throughout, which is why this is mainly for, people that want to not really pay attention to it too much, kind of treat it like a savings account. You select some moderate things, you throw them all in there. As long as the stock market didn't crash, you'll probably do okay. You won't be saving you won't be making a ton of money, but you'll probably do okay. Plus, if you've got money consistently going in here from your paycheck, tied to when you get paid, I'm thinking just for your own peace of mind, it always tells you the amount of money you have to pull out, and it depends on what you put in, of course. So maybe you have a cap on what you have invested, and you take some money out once you hit that cap, and then you invest that into a more low-risk security or something like that, or put that into a maybe a higher interest-bearing savings account. Maybe just let this build up a little bit, then take some out. Let it build up a little bit, then take some out. Because if the market does crash, you'll literally lose everything. So, who knows when that's going to happen. Usually it happens in a quick enough time that you can't pull it all out. By the time everybody knows shit's hitting the fan, it's too late. Yeah. So anyway, it's just an idea. We should all be saving a little bit of money. Like I said, you're not going to retire off of anything you put in here unless you drop $1 million in there. But anything's better than nothing. So I thought I'd put that out there.
So if you like looking at graphs of things going up and down and historical trends, you might like this next app. It's called Sleep Cycle. It's available on the App Store and on Google Play, so you can have it on iOS and on Android. I've been using it for over a year myself, and you've been using it for what you said, 4 years?
Something like that. Yeah. It's got 1,223 days I've been using it. I guess that's that's almost 4 years. Is that over 4 years?
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
You've been using it for a while. So, yeah, here's one that we're both actually using and can recommend for having used it for a while. The basic idea of this is a sleep tracker. And what you do is you set a time that you want to wake up. But it doesn't wake you up at that time. It tracks your sleep and tries to wake you up at an optimal time in your sleep patterns, as you're more wakeful, so it can wake you up more gently. I've used it for a year, and I've actually turned off the alarm part of it because I found that for me, it didn't matter. My alarm goes off and I get up out of bed. It's never been an issue for me. But it's really nice to be able to see and track what my sleep quality is like. And I can, what it does is you set it next to your bedstand, plug it in, and it uses the microphone to listen to your breathing mostly. And it's supposed to be good at discerning between you and your spouse in bed. And it certainly seems to be. The only time I ever have any trouble with it not being able to pick me up when I'm there is if I've put my head under the pillow or the dog has sat on my head. that has troubles. But otherwise it tracks very accurately with what I recognize my own sleep patterns when I've woken up in the middle of the night. Certainly finds anytime if I've, gotten up to go pee in the middle of the night, I'll see it on the graph afterwards. And it does a good job. It has a little sleep quality percentage there. And I've noticed that's really tracks closely with my own perception of my sleep. So I use this really to not to wake myself up at the best time, which again didn't seem to do much for me. But for me, it's to see day to day, week to week, what kind of sleep I'm getting, to have a semi-independent assessment of it, because you feel like, oh, I'm really tired this week. I didn't get good sleep, and I can look at the sleep tracker in Sleep Cycle and see, yeah, well, I really did not sleep well this week. I got 5 hours of sleep on average, and 2 of the nights I was awake for 2 hours in the middle of the night for no good reason. And it shows up there very clearly. So as a quality of life, keeping track of yourself, it's very interesting. You can correlate it against your exercise. If you're an alcoholic, if you're an archaeologist, you've probably had some alcohol at some time during the week, and you can see if
Nice.
the nights that I had more than 3 beers, I slept distinctly worse than those nights that I had fewer than 3 beers.
Nice. So if you're an archaeologist, it's No, the sleep.
Perfect for the archaeologist.
That's right. The sleep factors, I think, are the golden ticket to this thing, and it's because if you have the pro version too, which I was telling Paul, somehow I got the pro version for free one time, and it actually tracks trends based on some of those sleep factors and a whole bunch of other metrics, and it's got some built-in sleep factors. Like let me hit one here. So like, I don't know which ones of these are built in and which ones I added over the years, but, drank coffee, drank tea, ate late, worked out, stressful day. Those are kind of more traditional ones, but I also have on mine, hotel room, or motel room. There's a big difference in quality of your sleep. Roommate, no roommate.
Useful for shovel bums, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Are you next to a highway, stuff like that? You can add anything to these sleep notes if it's consistent and something you're constantly encountering. And for shovel bums, this is something I haven't done, but I think it'd be great for somebody who's in the field all the time. You can put down, excavation, lab work, office work, survey, shovel testing, things like that. So you can look historically and say, man, usually in the past when I did shovel testing for the day and I didn't have any beers, I slept like shit. But when I did shovel testing and I had like 3 beers, I slept like a baby, or maybe the other way around.
Yeah, that's what I found more important than anything else is that those days that I don't have a beer, I can't fall asleep at night. And it shows it quite clearly on my sleep tracker. And for the first hour and a half, I'm basically tossing and turning, half asleep or not asleep at all.
Right.
And if I've had a beer before I went to bed, then I can pass out.
I know. I actually find the same thing, and I find that having a glass of wine or something, a glass of bourbon or something right before I go to bed, that hour before I go to bed, just helps me. It helps quiet my mind, actually, because sometimes I've just got so much you're thinking about, and you're trying to plan the next day and maybe something happened or whatever. And you're just like, your brain just won't shut off. I find that helps shut me down a little bit. And then I go to sleep and I fall asleep quicker. And it's evident in the 1,200 days worth of graphs that I have here to prove it. So.
Well, the other thing that having those graphs and the statistics is nice for is, really using it as a health tracker too. I mean, so much of one's health, especially if you're susceptible to getting colds, for example, is related to the quality and quantity of sleep that you're getting. You can use it really to keep an eye on that. And if you find yourself getting sick a lot and you're getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night, you can prove it with this app, and then hopefully be able to adjust your sleep patterns a little bit so that you can try to get to bed a little earlier or wake up a little later, and see if that helps. It helps your overall well-being. Right,
and one of the other things that you can do here, and they turned this on, I want to say within the last year, I noticed it in the settings, and it's not on by default. So Paul, you might not even know it's there, but it will actually track your snoring.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. It tracks my snoring.
Yeah, and it puts this little waveform below your sleep graph where you snored, and then you can actually click in and listen to yourself snoring. So it's recording your snoring. Now I've noticed, because it's smart enough not to pick up voice, because I've woken up in the middle of the night before. We had a time just not too long ago where some loud noise happened or something like that. My wife and I both woke up, and I always look at my snoring in the morning. I like to see it. I don't snore that much. I snore at very particular times of the night, like right when I first fall asleep, before I go into that real deep sleep when my graph is right at the bottom. I'll snore a little bit then, and then not for the rest of the night usually. And I particularly looked at that because I was really watching the snore. I was telling somebody about it earlier or something, just coincidentally, and it did not record any of the voice. So if you're concerned with that, if you're concerned with it recording your voice and tracking you like that, it's smart enough not to do that. It just recorded the snoring. So that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty neat. And like Paul said, if you got a spouse or partner or somebody else in the room that's using it, if you're on the same Wi-Fi network, it actually shows me that, when my wife's is turned off, she turns hers on before me. It shows me that it's on. So it's not, it knows from an auditory standpoint, where you are, and it knows not to pick her. If it's picking up on hers better than it's picking up on mine, then it's not going to record it on mine, kind of thing. And keeps it separate and does a pretty good job at that. So anyway, hopefully that'll...
It's a really smartly designed app.
It really is. And for the price, I mean, the free one is amazing. And then I think it's only $5 to get the pro version and track everything. So it's definitely worth it. Use Stash a little while, invest until you get about $5, pull that out and go buy this app. So
perfect.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, Paul, I think that's it for this episode. Thanks for all the great comments on file formats this week, and hopefully everybody goes out and tries to make some money and get a better night's sleep out as a result of this episode.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks a lot, Chris. It was fun.
Yeah. All right. Check us out next time for episode 67. In the meantime, go to arcpodnet.com and check out all the things we have there. Go to /members to help support us, and go to /shop to buy some swag. Buy some Christmas presents for your other archaeology friends. Give them a mug. The APN mug is amazing. I love it.
We all
Use it every
need
day.
T-shirts and mugs.
That's right. T-shirts and mugs. That's all we live on. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. That's it for another episode of the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archaeotech. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for this episode. You can also email us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag Archaeotech or tag @ArcPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to this show wherever you saw it. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.